In our last episode, we discussed public procurement and open contracting at the subnational level, where we focused on how open contracting and public procurement is beneficial, to subnational governments, and the contribution of CSOs, of course, civil society organizations, in the implementation process. Well, on today's episode of Budget Podcast, we are taking the conversation a step further, still on open contracting, yes, but we'll be channeling the conversation to know if states are making progress or not. Are they making progress on open contracting or are they not? My name is Nancy Odemego, and joining me in the conversation today is the Programs Director, Public and Private Development Center, PPDC, Onyekachi Shoko. How are you, Kachi? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and you?
I am okay. So thank you for joining us. We are focusing on 2 episodes for open contracting. The first one we discussed was public procurement and open contracting at the subnational level. And for today, we would be focusing on open contracting still, if states are making progress or if they are not. So first off, if you were to measure the adoption of open contracting in Nigeria, for instance, how would you rate it in general?
Oh, okay. Well, thanks again for having me. All right. So basically for me, I would say when you speak of the adoption, well, it's been adopted, but then, of course, the implementation is exactly where the problem is. Generally, both at the federal and at the state level, the adoption has never actually been more of a problem, right? It's mostly implementing the open contracting itself that's been the problem. And I would probably say the reason why it seems there's been some sort of significant progress in terms of implementing open contracting at the subnational level particularly is probably because of this World Bank CEFTUS project, which of course subnational governments are supposed to meet some DLIs, disbursement linked indicators, and then once they're able to meet that, they get some sort of grant and all that. That's probably how, or reason why some states have actually tried implementing open contracting. But then from the last assessment that was actually done by Open Contracting Partnership, their structural assessment, a lot of states, I think it was just about 3 states only that actually passed it. A lot of the states didn't actually meet the requirements. Currently, they are working with different partners to see how they can actually meet the next one, because the CEFTUS project is coming to an end in June. So most states are also trying to see how they can get theirs to actually meet the OCP framework, pretty much, to be able to access the grants. But in my own personal opinion, I'd rather say that most of the states who are implementing open contracting are pretty much implementing it because of what they tend to gain, not particularly because of its importance. That's my own personal opinion, because it seems most of them are touching the benefits from CEFTUS as opposed to the benefits to open contracting itself, which generally allow citizens access to public procurement information and lastly participate in governance in their state. So that's for the subnational level. Then at the federal level, it's a bit dicey in the sense that it seems the BPP, for instance, at the federal level, have been trying to work with civil societies as well to get MDAs at the federal level to also publish their data on the NOCOPO, that's Nigeria's Open Contracting Portal, and it's been difficult, even from the assessments that were also done last year in terms of how well federal MDAs are actually updating their details on NOCOPO. Is also poor, really, because a lot of ministries that you would think you actually know probably from their budgets and all that are actually expending a lot of money actually have nothing published on NOCOPO. So generally, if I'm giving them over 10, I'll probably say at the federal level, we're still at a 2 over 10. And then at the state level, I'll probably just give them a 4, simply because of the CEFTUS. That's pretty much my own opinion about it.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned that most subnationals are really involved in open contracting because of what they tend to benefit from CEFTUS, right? So what would you say are some of the factors now that might be affecting the subnational from, improving public procurement in general and democratizing it for citizens? So the question is the big why. Why is this so?
Right. So I'll start by saying that I'm not a big fan of the CEFTUS project. I totally I'm not in support of it. And even though it's coming to an end, there's been talks about either extending it or starting up a new program that is similar to that. I'm not even in support of it, because basically you're in other words, giving people stuff to actually do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You don't have, exactly, this is something you're ordinarily supposed to do, but then you're inciting people, you're giving them grants, dashing them money, whatever, to do what they're ordinarily supposed to do. And it sort of, without begs that question, what happens when these kinds of incentives are no longer there? Does it mean that the whole projects, all the efforts that have been made by both, non-state actors and all that, does it mean everything just dies off? That's the big question, right? But for me, I also think a lot of the reasons that most, I think basically what I would say is that there is this low level of commitment in terms of people that are at the top, right? It's one thing to say, okay, I'm the governor and, we're adopting open contracting. It's another thing to actually make, say, budgetary provisions, give the people who are supposed to actually work on these portals the tools and the technical capacity that they require to actually allow them to do the work. So there is this commitment that is just at the top, but it doesn't trickle down to the main people who are supposed to actually man these portals, right? So you have people who are already procurement officers across various NDAs who already have a lot of work normally that they're doing, and then you now introduce this new thing, and then there is no new capacity building, there is no additional budget, probably there's no additional hands or whatever tools that they might need, and then we're still expecting them to actually meet targets and all that. So it just seems like these commitments are there at the top, it doesn't trickle down to the people who are actually going to do the dirty work themselves. So, which has been some things that we've been trying to do, even at my organization, trying to offer capacity building for, MDAs and all that. But then, of course, like I said, there's always a limit to these things, right? Because that commitment really needs to trickle down. They need to understand the reason why the government are actually adopting these things. What is the rationale behind it? But if everybody just understands it as, they're adopting this particular thing simply because they want to meet the disbursement linked indicators of the sector's project so that they can access the grant. I mean, everybody just wouldn't really be bothered.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we're talking about sustainability, I mean, it's not really there.
Okay. Are there examples of maybe some states that have done it right? If you're talking about the implementation of open contracting at subnational level.
Right. So, when you say something has been done right, it's one thing to have a portal or something that looks like a portal, right? It's another thing to have a portal that actually has data in them. And there's another thing that actually has a portal that has quality data in them. So when you're asking for a state that actually meets all these criteria, I don't think there's a state that actually meets all this currently. But then there are states that are actually trying to actually meet some of this. From the last APA that was done by, sectors, I think it was just 3 states that actually met the structural check. And this structural check, that was Cross River, Edo, and Plateau. Those were the only 3 states that met structural check. The structural check is not the data inside, it's just the structure of the portal. Is it in line with the open contracting partnership, format and all that? So basically what that was actually just checking is if it actually was in line in terms of how the portal was built, not necessarily what the data inside those portals are, right? So by the time you now start looking at states that have data on their portals and all that, I think Ebonyi is there, Kaduna is there, Ekiti is there, and some other states as well that are, actually have data in them, right? But in terms of having open contracting portals that actually it follows the whole open contracting data standards, all the fields, throughout the whole procurement chain are actually filled in the portal. There are just very few states that actually have that. Hence the whole, trying to link the whole e-procurement and open contracting portals to sort of make things a bit easier for them. So when you ask for states that are performing well, it depends on how you're looking at it. Are you looking at it from the structural angle, or are you looking at it from the data angle? Right? So it depends on how exactly you're viewing it. But in terms of structure, like I said, from the APA from last year, was Cross River, Edo, and Plateau that, met the 3 structural checks. But in terms of data, you have Kaduna, you have Ekiti, you have Ebonyi as well, in terms of data on their portals.
So, but in terms of structure and data, we don't have any states in that category.
Yeah, but I'm guessing before the next APA that'll be coming up by June, I'm guessing most states would also, since the sector's grant is running out, so it's closing out soon. So I'm guessing a lot of states will try as much as possible to see that they meet up with the whole, checks of the OCP data review. So, but for right now, no one has everything. No.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's focus on the contribution of CSOs now. Right, you mentioned where PPDC is coming in and doing some, I think, capacity training or so. So, in what ways are CSOs contributing to the adoption of open contracting at a subnational level?
Okay, CSOs pretty much have been driving it, really, in terms of ensuring that states actually implement open contracting and implement it properly. So, how they've been doing this, they've been offering technical support to both state actors themselves and then the non-state actors in the state as well. So PPDC, for instance, offers technical support to states to develop and deploy their open contracting portals, trains their procurement officers on how to enter data on their portal, to clean and enter data on their portal, and also to make sure that their portal also meets the whole OCP review too, and all that. They're able to pass those checks and all. Then for the other part of the non-state actors, you have CSOs also building capacity of local CSOs in the states to enable them understand the whole public procurement process, understand open contracting, to enable them actually use those portals. It's one thing to have, open contracting in this real sense is publishing and participation. So if there's that publishing angle and there's no participation, it's not complete. So the participation part is where the local civil societies and the states are now trained on open contracting, and then also mobilized, to also start using data sets on their portals to track projects, in their states and ensure that they are probably implemented and all that. Track projects, report on them, carry out advocacy for projects that need fixes and the like. So those are a couple of things that, non-state actors have been doing at the subnational level.
So speaking about state legislatures now and how they can be engaged, to provide the necessary oversight and backing for the establishment of open contracting, in what ways would you say state legislatures can actually come in?
Right. So this is, I think, one of the major points that have actually been missing in the whole talk about implementing open contracting at the subnational level. The legislatures are actually one set of stakeholders that have actually been missing in that conversation, because for us to actually speak about sustainability of open contracting in any state whatsoever, we should be talking about having proper policies and laws that actually backs up these things, right? Because if not, you have new change in government and you have a new governor who isn't interested in anything regarding open government or regarding open contracting or anything like that. It's not their own business. It's not all the states that have signed up to OGP till date. Despite all the good things states have been benefiting and all that, some governors have not really refused to sign up to open government partnership, not because they don't have an understanding of what it is, but because they don't want, to open their books and all that. So definitely legislatures are actually a very, very key stakeholder here, in the sense that we need to have in their public procurement laws probably being amended and having sections stating categorically that MDAs are actually supposed to publish on their open contracting portals. MDAs are supposed to implement their public procurement, via the whole e-procurement and all that. Without having these legal frameworks, you won't have any sustainability. You won't have any legal backing in terms of saying, if you have a change in government, what if this new person doesn't want it? But if it's legally backed up, whoever comes into power any day at any time, these are already standing laws, right?
Yeah.
It's not something you wake up and just change. So they're already there. So, but then I think it's the legislators also first of all need to understand what exactly open contracting is, what the state tends to gain, because too, if they don't understand what those things are, they have no idea what these things mean, the reason, the rationale for having them. So it will also be difficult for them to, push for it to actually be have a legal framework that actually backs that up. So that is they have a very big role to play here, because like I said, all this support from from international bodies such as the World Bank and the likes, they just come and go. They have a time span, right? At some point, these international bodies are actually going to move their attention to something else. What happens when they leave open contracting and probably moves to something else, right?
Yeah.
Or does it mean that all the efforts we've actually made, goes down the drain? So I think it's high time we start thinking towards that direction and having a legal framework that actually ensures and enshrines that open contracting, e-procurements are things that are actually spelled out, on the public procurement laws at the subnational level.
Okay. All right, thanks. Focusing on technology now, do you think technology has probably a critical role to play in strengthening open contracting, and procurement? And if yes, what kind of tech solutions and innovations or investments do you think the federal government or the government should focus on?
Right. So, open contracting on its own, the whole idea of open contracting, e-procurement and the likes, it's already technology, really.
Yes.
We're thinking about moving from, the regular paper and, format of people tendering their bids, writing papers, submitting and all that, moving to a point where people can actually sit in the comfort of their homes, tender their bids, and actually track it from there. And the bids are done online and everything. So it's fair. Everybody's transparent. It's accountable. Literally, everybody can actually follow and see what these things are. You can literally track a project from the first stage down to the final stage when the projects have actually been implemented. The world is totally moving towards technology. There's no take back. So I'm not even going back. Look at us having a conversation right now from different parts of the country. So this is not something that anybody's taking back. This is where we are heading. In spite of no matter who is in the office and all that. So technology is here to stay. Now the question is, it's one thing to have these great technologies, but then do people have the capacity to actually utilize these technologies? That's another question. We've agreed that it plays a critical role in open contracting and public procurement. But then, before we even start talking about the kinds of investments governments needs to do, the question is, the people you are leaving these great technologies in their hands to take care of, do they have the capacity to actually utilize these things? I'm sorry to say, but when you get into some, public offices, there are a lot of people who have worked there for years and can't even use a computer. Right? Yeah. Exactly. The basic things on Microsoft, let's not even go fast, Google Doc and all this. Just basic
office stuff.
Do you understand? So it makes it really. So how do you want this kind of person to start entering data at the back end using spreadsheets and the likes and all that? So those are some of the gaps that when we speak of investments, now this is where government should start from. The capacity of people who are supposed to man these new technologies. It's not to just invest millions or billions into building e-procurement portals and all that. And then at the end of the day, people who are supposed to man them have no idea how to use those things. So for me, if you talk of investments, we should start with the human investment first, right? Start with the human investment, train the people who are supposed to man this, retrain the people, have them train other people so that even in their absence, or when they're on leave or whatever, other people can also continue from where they stop.
Yes.
Exactly. So you don't have this knowledge. You're not building an individual. You're pretty much building the institution. So people around should be able to do these kinds of things and on their own, right? So that's, for me, that's the first investment that any government that intends to actually implement open contracting pretty properly. That's the very first thing they should do: invest in people, ensure that they get the requisite trainings and capacity building that they require. That's first. Then before we now go into them purchasing whatever they need to purchase. And then another important aspect is in terms of what do you call it? Also informing citizens of what these new technologies are. Because it's one thing to have the people in government, only them having this knowledge. The citizens also need to understand this new process that is coming into play. This is the reason for this new introduction of technologies in public procurement. Both suppliers, the contractors, and the like should understand or should know the reason why we're moving from the regular paper to this and all that. So if that information is also there, generally people can accept these things by the time they understand the reason for it, and then they're also able to also put some sort of pressure as well on the government to do what they're supposed to do. So I think for me, those are the kinds of investments the government should actually focus on now to actually get open contracting, e-procurement, being implemented properly in their states.
Okay, so going forward, what should we expect? What are the expectations now? Where do you see Nigeria as regards to open contracting, let's say in the next couple of years?
I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I have this great fear that once is 30th of June this year, you're going to have a lot. Exactly. That's my biggest fear, and because as a matter of fact, a lot of government right now, actually, particularly states who are, a lot of people right now are talking about 2023.
Yes, that's really the subject.
Nobody is talking about any of these things anymore. If you have a governor who's probably done 2 tenures, is thinking about, okay, am I moving to the Senate or whatever? And then you have those who are just done first tenure trying to come back for a second tenure and all that. So this conversation right here is, because I know I've been in conversation with, the sectors of phase, Nigerian Governors Forum, trying to see how we can get states to actually meet up with this possible litigators to get them to access the grants. But for me, in my head, it's not just to access the grant. What is the sustainability plan? So if you ask me sincerely today, here and now, where I think open contracting will be in the next 5 years, I can't tell you that I'm very certain that we would have been where we should, right? Yeah. Because unless you actually have governors and governments who are actually very sincere and serious about, opening up their books, because once those incentives are no longer there, they really have nothing to lose. Because even there are still going to be states who will not access this grant, who will still not do anything. Nothing happens to them. There are no penalties.
Yes.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, anybody that is doing it either because, let me do it to make people happy. Let me do it because I want to access this grant.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let me just do what other people are doing. But it's really nothing. Nobody's thinking about, this is actually a very important thing to do and all that. But so in the next 5 years, fingers crossed.
Okay. So thank you. Now that leaves me with one question, right? I understand your view. Thank you so much. So would you say states are making progress or they are not?
All the states are not making progress, obviously. Right? so it can't even be answered. It's not even a general question that has a general answer. Some states are making efforts. But now the question is, what is the reason behind them making those efforts? Are they making those efforts because they really want to? Or are they making those efforts because they want to get this benefits? But all in all, I'll say some states are trying, because I can confidently tell you that when you interact with a couple of civil societies today, they will tell you that 3, 4, 5 years, particularly those who are at the subnational level, they tell you that 3, 4, 5 years they couldn't even access any procurement information. They will tell you that 3, 4, 5 years they couldn't track projects, they couldn't carry out any advocacies for them to fix projects in communities and all that. But these days you have them doing it. So that's also progress. Let's not make it seem like it's all negative, right? There's also been some positive stuff happening. You have the civil societies actually telling you, calling and telling you, they fixed this project after we tracked it. We have a kind of a campaign on this. So communities are happy. Communities are trying to understand and now starting to understand what this thing means. Communities are now starting to understand that these projects that have been implemented in their communities are not donations from their representatives or anything. These are actually proper government funds that are being used to implement this project. So there's been progress in terms of the non-state actors understanding what this thing is and the benefits, and trying to use the data that they have there in working. And then for the state actors, they've also been in some states, some DGs who are very up and doing, who are very interested in making sure their portals are, properly done and ensuring that data is there. But of course, there's always those gaps, like I've mentioned, because most of the time you're expecting the way this open contracting procurement is supposed to work is that you're supposed to be having these data sets live, as soon as. Yes, it's not when the project has been awarded and implemented.
Yes,
you now publish data for me, and so at that point, most of the time, there's really nothing you can do. There's no change you can actually make in terms of if there are problems regarding those projects. So there's still a couple of gaps that some state governments are still yet to feel. But all in all, they're trying. That's all I can say. That's all I can pretty much say.
Yes.
They're trying, but
they need to do better. It could be better. Okay.
Yeah, it could.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kachi. I'm feeling the temptation to ask you for a recommendation. Probably, what do you think they could do better, the federal government now, or state government?
Okay. So for me, the very first thing is institutionalizing this process. That's the first thing for me, because most of these DGs or MDs, however they call it in the city, are appointed.
Yes.
Even though we are saying, okay, government is continuous, unfortunately, it's not so continuous like that in Nigeria. So you have different governments coming in with their new agendas and all that. So for me, the very first thing is institutionalizing these things. So you don't build the capacity of just an individual, or don't be the best DG in terms of implementing it. No, people who are working in that whole, for crying out loud, this is civil service. It doesn't change anyway. People don't just wake up and they don't have tenures. It takes time before people retire and all that. So any government that comes in ends up still working with the same civil servants. So when you're building the capacity of the civil servants, then we're talking about, okay, this sustainability thing, and not making it a question of scoring political points or whatever. It should be what it is, which is trying to improve procurement systems and making it public procurement system, making it more transparent in the state. That's what it is. Not necessarily trying to meet DLI so that you can, that's a lot of money, so that you can access these millions of dollars and all that. It should be because you're trying to actually build this public procurement system and making it more transparent in your state. So my first recommendation would be institutionalizing these systems. The trainings should also be passed down to other people. Even when you employ new people in the civil service, they should also be trained on these same things, so that this knowledge is always there. So that would be my first recommendation. And then the second recommendation would be that the international donors or funders, particularly the World Bank, whatever it is, that I think even if they have these plans of trying to extend CEFTAS or create a new program that is similar to CEFTAS, I think they need to actually also reach out to a couple of civil societies who are working on these kinds of things to actually get the exact ways to actually get states to meet these TLIs. Sometimes when I read the TLIs, it's very easy to meet some of the time, because all you have to do is meet a couple of things when it's time to do an assessment, you get your money, and that's it. What happens once I access the money? I can go back to, so it should be structured in such a way that it's not something people can wake up overnight and just fix the problem, present it to you during your assessment, and then you leave and give them money. So those, and then of course, I strongly recommend that people shouldn't be given incentives for doing their job.
You made that one very clear from the beginning.
It is. You're government. This is what you're supposed to do. This is public funds. Make it open. Let people know exactly what you're doing with them. So that's it. Then for the federal level, I know there's been a lot of things going on behind the scenes, trying to get federal MDAs actually start utilizing COPO and publishing their details and all that. So I think also there should be some level of what I call it, like the commitment at the high level has already been done, the president signing up and all that, but there should also be some sort of instruction. I think I've been in forums where we had even recommended that before budgets of MDAs actually approved, there should have been evidence that they've uploaded details of their previous ones. So there should be these kinds of I wouldn't call it's not penalty, it's not a sanction, it's just a measure to ensure that they actually publish. So if I'm telling you that I'm not going to approve your budget for next year until you've published all you did, use this money to do the full contracting, full public procurement information for the previous year before I approve your budget for the next year, I don't think any MDA will fail to actually do what they're supposed to do. So these are measures that I think both at the federal and at the state, the governments can actually adopt if they sincerely want to get MDAs to actually publish their public procurement information. So those will be my two major recommendations, really.
Okay, thank you so much, Kachi. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. I mean, two things to pick from everything. You said we should institutionalize the system, and government should not train one person, but rather they should train the entire civil servant. So when the MDs and the DGs get changed based on administration, which they will eventually be changed, the system continues, and there's at least sustainability in all of this thing. I will not forget. Do not give incentive to people when they are supposed to do their job. I will not forget that one. Yes, and having proper policies and laws, and at least letting the legislatures understand what open contracting is, so that they could come in and draft these policies, enact these laws, and so it continues, and we do it for the right reason actually, and not just because we have a DLI to fulfill and some money to cash out from a particular program. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your 2 cents on the matter. Open contracting, are states making progress or not? Well, I already know your answer. Thank you so much. It was nice having you on the platform today.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
All right. And that was Onyeka Chichuku, Programs Director, PPDC, sharing his 2 cents on if the states are actually making progress or if they're not. There is a need for the government to institutionalize the system, train civil servants so the knowledge is always there. Legislators can also come in by drafting proper policies and enacting laws. And of course, they really need to understand what open contracting is all about before they could actually do this. And, people being given incentives for actually doing the right thing or doing their job. But you also can be a part of the conversation on our social media platform. It's Budget NG on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. My name is Nancy Odumego. Have a lovely day.